Welcome to the Up Arrow Podcast with William Harris, featuring top business leaders sharing strategies and resources to get to the next level. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, I'm William Harris, the founder and CEO of Element and the host of the Up Arrow Podcast, where I feature the best minds in e-commerce to help you scale from 10 million to 100 million and beyond, as well as help you up arrow your business and your personal life. And my guest today is Matt Bertulli, the co-founder and CEO of Pela and Lomi. They are a certified B-corp, have Jay-Z's Marcy Venture Projects as a notable investor, were named top 10 in the Canadian Business Growth 500, and are number one in Deloitte's Fast 50 for clean tech businesses in Canada. He's also one of the hosts of the Operators Podcast. It's fantastic. You should definitely want to check that out. And today we're talking about his tips and tricks for DTC success, ideas for being a better CEO, acquisitions, advertising, and operations, the full shebang. He's my fratello from another madre, Matt Bertulli. It's great to have you here.
Right on, man. I like it. Good touch. Throwing in the Italian.
We talked about the Duolingo. We're both learning Italian here.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So I also want to give a shout out to David Herman, the brilliant David Herman, one of my best friends, incredible marketer, LA police chase connoisseur, because he is the one who put us in touch.
Yeah. David's a good dude. I like him a lot. Yeah.
Everybody who knows David likes David. I want to get into the good stuff. Before we do, I want to announce our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Element. Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, we've helped 13 of our customers get acquired, with the largest one selling for nearly $800 million and one that IPO'd recently. You can learn more on our website at element.com, which is spelled ELUMYNT.com. That said, I got to start off with the backstory. I always like hearing backstories, but one in particular for you, because you're really good at talking about a lot of your stuff on Twitter. So there's a lot of stuff I could pull from. And 2018, sold your first company for what you said was a life-changing amount of money, but it almost didn't happen. And you were the reason why. You said, I got to know more of the story. And you went into it on Twitter, but for those who hadn't seen this, I'd like to know what's the story here.
Yeah, man. I think I don't say most. I know a lot of founders who've sold their companies, and inevitably the question that gets asked afterwards is like, could I have gotten more? Sure. And I know just as many founders, and I've talked to so many, that have blown up deals, right? Like they've literally walked away from the process because I can get more. And I was definitely one of those people, like looking at the process thinking, geez, like I could absolutely sell this company for more money. Let's grow it a little more. Let's go further. Like what if, right? And I think what I talked about in that tweet thread is, I read this piece called, I think it was called Rich or King by Jason Cohen, who's the founder, I think it's of W Promote now. But at the time it was a company called A Smart Bear. And this was like one of the best lessons I've ever had, is like reading this thing and then talking about it with like my brother and my co-founder, is this like idea of the box game, right? And it's when you're selling your company as an entrepreneur, we're inevitably like, we are optimists. We're eternal optimists. Every founder I know is like, even if they're like, they seem negative, they're an optimist. So when you're when somebody comes along and says like, I will offer you this amount of money for your business and here's the terms, that's like, they're putting a box on the table and they're putting some amount of money in that clear box. Well, a simple version of the box game is like, you and I could play it right now. We could just say like, okay, look, I'm going to put two boxes on the table. One's clear, one's not clear. In the clear one, I'm going to put $1,000. And in the opaque one, I'm going to say there's a 50% chance of 10 grand and a 50% chance of zero. Well, you as a business owner right now, and depending on where you are in your life financially, you'd be like, I'll roll the dice. I'll go after the 10 grand. Because 1,000, like 100% guarantee of $1,000 doesn't really change your life. Sure. Well, when you start to scale the dollar amounts up and somebody comes along and says, here's a 100% guarantee that I'm going to give you $5 million or $10 million. But in the other box that you can't see, there's a 50% chance that it's zero, and there's a 50% chance that it's like double that amount. Maybe it's 20 million. Well, most founders who've never sold a company before are going to be like, I will now take the guarantee of $5 or $10 million because it changes your life, right? Sure. And you have to play the game. Here's the trick. You have to play this game And you can do this with all, it doesn't need to be selling companies. It can be all like risk adjusted, I'm trying to evaluate opportunity. You have to play the game honestly. You can't say, well, it'll never be zero. That's not true. Like there's lots of things out of your control that can totally send your company to zero. I don't give a shit how good of a founder you are. Yeah. So I like to talk about it because I feel like I've been an entrepreneur now 15, 16 years. Like I've been kicked in the teeth enough to know that your plans are never right. Like you're going to be wrong. And the goal is to be wrong to the upside, not the downside. And that you should protect against downside. And I think that when founders get a chance to take chips off the table, our optimism and our greed can often get in our way. And so I tell this story a lot because I want people to know the lesson.
Yeah, that's very true. And this idea of like this offset risk kind of reminds me a little bit of even the cryptocurrency game or whatever too, right? Where it's like, oh, well, you can put this into this meme coin and whatever, and but there's this chance of 1,000% gain or whatever. And, yeah, exactly.
All this bullshit.
When Lambo.
Yeah, totally. And the thing is too, you hear about the one or two people that it did work for. Yeah. And then that gives everybody this bias that like, that could be, it's no different than buying lottery tickets, right? It's the same psychology. Yeah. And when you're building a business, you're kind of buying a lottery ticket, but you have a little more control over the outcome. Right. I think the other side of this too, man, is like, I think culturally, this like founder entrepreneurial thing, it's almost like we're not okay with base hits or doubles. Like just culturally, it's like, if there's no grand slam, I'm not interested. Yeah. And I just
grand slam or strikeout. That's it.
Like rich is good, dude. Like you don't need to be king. You don't need to have the biggest exit. Just like be rich. It's better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wise. And so you're getting into some of the characteristics of a great CEO. You're talking about, one of these is being able to look at risk thoughtfully. Yep. You also talked a little bit about kind of what you would define as 7 characteristics that make a great CEO. What are, let's just say, 1 or 2 of your top favorite characteristics that you think are imperative to be a CEO that performs?
Okay, so like I think curiosity and communication are probably the 2 that I probably biased those because those are like the 2 that I like, that are probably like my strengths. Look, I think a good CEO is forever curious. A good founder is forever curious. They question everything. They don't assume anything is true, right? There's just like, they run into this, like, there's no sacred cows. They don't care about who's right. They care about what's right. So I think that's like number 1 to me. I will invest. I do a bunch of angel investing. Like I will invest in people on that characteristic. It's like they are just willing to scratch and scratch and scratch until they find the answer. Like they'll just run through walls to like, and that curiosity and their drive makes them do that. The communication thing, I think it's actually becoming more appropriately weighted, but I believe for a long time it's actually like well valued, but underappreciated in like for new founders or new entrepreneurs. Like if they've never done the job before, right? Like when you start a company, you think of yourself first as a founder or entrepreneur. Then eventually at some point, if you're successful to some degree, you have to make the transition to like, no, I'm now a CEO. Like I have to run this damn thing. And communication is always at the top of my list because when you start building a real company, you have people. Like, so you have employees, you have investors, you have customers, you have stakeholders in your business. And great communication is great comprehension. And if nobody comprehends what the hell you're saying, you're probably not going to be very successful. Especially over the long haul, like you might get short-term win, but like long-term, like I want to be around and build something that's valuable. I think being able to communicate in the organization, out of the organization is at the near top of what the CEO should do.
Yeah. So let's talk about both of these a little bit. Curiosity, I'm with you 100%. And I'm somebody who is very naturally curious as well. Even to my detriment, let's just say like as a kid, I remember being curious. It's like, man, we clean every part of our body, but we never clean our eyeballs. And I can remember taking hydrogen peroxide as a kid and being like, I'm going to clean it wasn't a very good idea, but the curiosity got the better of me. But it was one of the ones when we went through several different iterations of our core values as a team. And one of the ones that I had in the early days was stay curious, because to me, there's no way as an agency we can crush it for our clients' goals if we just say, these are the best practices. We're going to do these forever and ever and ever. We're not staying curious about what's next. What if we could dig a little deeper there? What about a little deeper here? So curiosity, I'm with you 100%.
You know, this shows up a lot in DTC where, especially in advertising, in direct to consumer, where like oftentimes what I have seen it so many times, right? Something will work, right? And you look like a fucking hero. And like ad scale, it's like, it just crushes. Yep. The funny thing is like, if you 9 times out of 10, if you ask somebody why it worked, they can't tell you. And then, you know, depending on age of company, there's like, if you're a young company, there's a really good chance that if you've got something that works, you either got lucky, right? Or it's actually not the best thing you'll ever produce. Whereas if you're a really old company, there's a good chance that you've probably produced all of your best stuff and now you're just making incremental gains. And that by being curious, right, regardless of stage of business or size of business, you should be questioning, like that curiosity is going to force you to question the results, even if they're great, right? If you can't explain why, up or down, you know, you're shooting in the dark, man. And that's just like, that makes me uncomfortable, which is why I always put like curiosity near the damn top.
Yeah. Somebody at Blockbuster wasn't curious enough about what Netflix was doing. Like, could have prevented that, right? They weren't curious enough. And then communication though. Okay. So let's say that you are transitioning from that entrepreneur role to the CEO and communication isn't your strong suit, right? Like, are there tips, tricks, things that you have seen that have helped to elevate strong communication in CEOs?
Okay, look, I'll say this. I think when people think communication, they think like being able to speak or stand up in front of people. You are alive, literally a living creature, because you figured out how to communicate with other living creatures. So like this concept that like people are bad at communication, that's actually like, I don't buy that for a second. That's like saying I don't know how to think. That's a stupid fucking thing to say. Like everybody can do it, man. Like you exist in this planet. So unless you exist like literally in a basement, you never interact with human beings, of which, let's just say like no founder is doing that.
Right.
You clearly have some kind of communication baseline. So usually what I tell like younger founders who are like, I get nervous talking in front of people, or I'm not a natural orator, is like, well, great. Then get better at the written word. Start there. You know, like great writing is great communication. And like, you don't need to be the best speaker. You don't need to be charismatic. You just need to have a medium in which you can communicate. And remember, great communication is great comprehension that other people can comprehend. So like I write a lot on Twitter because I just like to write a lot. It helps me think. Right. And that's why I think like I put communication near the top, because great communication means that you are thinking through what you are saying. And that matters.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely matters. If you can't communicate what's in your mind, in your vision, in your thoughts, then it's impossible for the team to be able to execute on those as well. I remember implementing EOS traction a couple of years ago, and it absolutely changed the game for us in such a big way, because I was finally able to take what was inside of here and put it in a place where people could start executing and creating their own ideas about how to get there. But now we're all at least going to the same direction.
And I mean, look at like traction is amazing. It's great. Like we run our version of EOS as well. I've built multiple companies on EOS. It gives you a common language, communication, and it gives you common structure where like things are repeated enough in that structure and in those rhythms that information is comprehended more easily, which makes you able to build a company more easily. That's why it's so damn important. Is if you can't get a team to comprehend what you're trying to do, you can't get a team to do anything. So you won't last without that.
So let's transition into one of the other things that a CEO needs to be able to do. You talked about one of your top jobs then, so not characteristics, but one of your top jobs as a CEO is to deter competition, specifically looking at like 7 moats on how you can deter competition. why is that one of the top jobs as a CEO? And like, what are your favorite moats that maybe you've employed or that you think just tend to do the best?
Well, I think for like, look, this is mostly going to be people who are in consumer.
Yes.
In consumer, there's not a lot of, especially for younger companies, there's just not a lot of like moat building. Not really. Not in the traditional sense, right? So I think that like for most consumer businesses, the easiest one to go after is just be the most profitable version of your category. So like if you sell t-shirts, be the most profitable t-shirt company, because the more cash you generate, the more ability you have to do things in the category that your competition won't. Like most people think that it's like Apple's so valuable because their marketing is amazing or their product is amazing. No, they're freaking valuable because they generate weird amounts of cash. Yeah. And that allows, they capture an obscene amount of the free cash flow of the entire smartphone category. Yeah. Right? That's their moat, is like if there's $1 of free cash flow available in the smartphone category, they get 90 cents of that dollar. Every other person is competing over 10 cents. So yes, they win. So I think that like for consumer businesses, cash generation for 99% of them is the best moat. Like just be great at that. Look, deter competition is also a really interesting one for consumer brands. I was talking about this. I actually did another show recently for another guy. And this is a topic I actually do like talking about this, because I think we're in a world now where like building a consumer brand has gotten so easy to start that it's very easy to knock people off. And that's partly like tools and tech, like the Shopify, you can fire a store up in seconds. That's the thing that they're so proud of. And it's amazing. We're all so grateful to have Shopify in our lives. Amazing. But Absolutely. It's also just allowed a lot of bad behavior, right? And there's no such thing as like, I started a company, it works, and I don't have any competition anymore. It's like, no. If you combine Shopify with like the ubiquity of manufacturing in China, how easy it is to find shit and get white labeled stuff or whatever, you now have an uber competitive landscape. So I like to, I'm invested in a few companies right now that they don't operate in stealth, but they definitely they're not loud either, right? Yeah. They're going to go as far as they can without really letting the world know that they're there. They're going to serve their customer, but they don't need to tell the rest of the world that they're there. And I actually think that's like one of the easiest things that you could, I think the funny thing is too, is like, I think there's way too many people that have businesses that aren't ever going to be brands. They're just like, there's a funnel that works of some kind. It's profitable for now. They will never tell anybody what they sell because they know that there's no way, like there's no barrier to knocking them off. Like somebody can just go on Alibaba and buy the thing and you're good. And they're done, right? Now the whole category gets competed to zero. So I think what I'm saying is like, you build your company, but do it in a way that like you don't need to alert competitors that you're around. But if you're so scared of telling anybody what you sell for fear of a knockoff, to me, that means you don't have a strong enough value proposition and you actually don't have something valuable. So like, don't confuse those two things. But I think it's your job. I think your job is to figure out like, what is the mix of ingredients that we have as a company that makes us so unique that even if somebody created a similar looking, sounding, talking, walking product, that the customer is like, yeah, but it's not the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of like the magician, right? If you show somebody how to do the magic trick, it still doesn't mean I can do the magic the same way David Blaine does. He can show it to me 800 times and I'm still not going to be able to do it even remotely as well as he is. And that's one of his moats, is that his product, the training that he's put into it is just significantly better than mine.
Totally.
We see this in the agency world all the time as well. There's nothing that stops somebody from being able to say that they're an agency for the most part. They've run ads at some, and now they're like, well, now they're a Facebook ads agency or a TikTok ads agency. And one of the moats I would say steer people away from, both in service-based or product-based companies, are moats that are shackles or fake moats. There are ways that you could do this, but let's just say stay away from those. One that I know happens in the agency world is maybe agencies will own the ad account, and it's like, well, that's the moat. The moat is you can't leave because we own it, and so you're stuck with us. We've got you.
It's a stupid ass moat.
Horrible moat. But I see product companies try to do the same thing here too, especially if they're newer. It's like, well, maybe there's like a way in which they're basically like holding you captive against your will. And anytime you're holding somebody captive against their will, not only are you going to end up eventually still losing them as a customer, but you're going to create bad will with other people. Now, there's benefits to some of this.
Yes. There's lock-in.
There's a limit,
right? Like, so
yeah,
B2B, especially, the value of a B2B company sometimes does come down to like how sticky is the customer, right? Like, and yeah, what you're talking about is like almost like a false flag lock-in.
Yeah. Yep.
Whereas like there is such thing as like one of the true moats out there is that it's incredibly hard for a customer to leave you. Like switching costs are very high. You see that a lot in enterprise, right? A lot of enterprise software is like that. Like SAP is like that. When you spent $100 million implementing SAP, there's a good chance that you're not leaving SAP.
Right.
So there is definitely some element of like switching cost and lock-in for sure. But I think for consumer businesses, it's rare to have that. Like it's very rare. Even the best subscription companies don't have, like the consumer doesn't have some incredibly high switching cost to switch from like this supplement to this one.
Sure.
It's not like the best thing you could go for is like you have some high version of loyalty. So I mean, service can matter a lot for keeping people around, for sure.
Absolutely. And I'd say that's one of the things that I really appreciate about some of the places that I've shopped at, where their service, maybe their price is even a little bit higher.
Yep.
But their service is so fantastic that I don't care. Because the service was worth it to me.
Yes. 100%. Yeah. I'm that person, right? I will.
Yep.
I care less about the price of something, and I care more about the amount of brain damage I'm going to have to like deal with the company.
Right. Absolutely. Something else you mentioned, last one on the CEO stuff before we move on, is as a CEO, there are 3 things on your mind. 1, grow sales. 2, reduce costs. 3, mitigate risk. This is something you said on Twitter as well.
Yep.
Why those 3 things?
Everything boils up to those 3 things. Like, I don't care what else somebody thinks they're doing in a company. Maybe you could justify saying like, there's another activity that will grow shareholder value. Like there might be a 4th thing. Absolutely everything, every activity in a business will roll up to one of those 3.
Yeah.
Everything, whether you're working on product, supply chain, you're in sales, you're in marketing, like finance, I don't care what it is. You are always doing one of those 3 things. So it's actually just a nice filter. If you're trying to figure it, like the hard part of our job, right? When you're building companies is deciding what to do next. Like, I think that is the hardest thing, is like, what's the next best thing to do? And oftentimes this simple little filter is like, well, if somebody's like, here's 10 things we could do, if all 10 of those things are in grow sales and nothing is in mitigate risk or nothing is in reduced cost, you are likely making a misstep, right? Like you're too focused on advancing, not enough on defense. So I just think that like, it is always going to, the right moves are often some mix of those 3.
I think it makes sense. 3 legs of a stool. I mean, an old metaphor for so many things, but it's just that idea that it can't stand if you're just going off of one.
Yep.
So let's switch into acquisitions a little bit. There's a couple of things you've said that I really appreciate on this topic. And we obviously hinted at one of those up above here when we were talking. But one thing you said is that a lot of founders want to sell because of pain.
Yeah.
And this is one of the worst things they could possibly do. Why is this such a bad thing? First of all, why do you think a lot of founders want to sell because of pain? And then why is this so bad and what should they do instead?
I think fatigue is a real thing when you're a founder. And I've talked to, I don't know, maybe a few dozen founders looking to sell their company in the last 6 months. I'm looking to buy, I'm an acquirer over the long haul. And oftentimes, like when you spend enough time with them, I started to notice this pattern. I'm like, it's, they've been at it 5+ years, sometimes longer. It's not doing what they wanted to do. They've got something else they want to do. Like there's a bunch of ways that pain shows up, right? But it's not hard to suss out like what the motivation for selling the business. And a lot of companies that, especially in consumer, a lot of the businesses that want to sell tend to be smaller and they tend to not be as old. Like they're probably at that 5-year mark. It's like the 7-year itch in marriage, right? It's like there's I think it's a real thing. I think founder fatigue starts to set in between 5 and 7 years. And that I think in consumer right now too, we have a lot of people who have started consumer businesses that are almost like tourists to the industry. They're likely not going to be here a long time. They want to jump over to AI now. They probably wanted to jump to crypto when that was out. And they're only in consumer because like it had a moment where it was hot, right? There's lots of venture dollars. So I just see a ton of this in the space. I think it'll shake out. I think the tourists will leave. But it's not just a consumer thing either. I think the founder fatigue thing is more often, I believe it's actually like more often than not the reason the founder wants to sell than it is like, okay, the business is at a great spot. I like it's perfect to sell now. Sure. All buyers want the ideal business. Like everybody wants that. They want the latter. Mm-hmm. Truth is most companies for sale, the person just wants out.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too, that you called out that idea of, wanting to sell versus needing to sell and finding that right time. You talked about the 7-year itch. It reminds me of something Justin Mayers said. I think he actually wrote a book called Traction too, different traction. But it talks a lot about what a lot of businesses don't even actually hit that traction until about 5 years in. And so you're getting that itch 5 years in and you're like, I'm kind of done. It might be that you're just literally at that cusp where those year 5 through 7 are the rough patch years that you have to get through. And when you can break through, there's a ceiling though that you're up against that you have to push through some of that pain. And a lot of people just maybe don't have the grit to push through that.
Yeah, I mean, dude, 100%. Like so here's the other thing. I understand the argument that so Shopify is probably the biggest proponent of this, right? It's like they want to help people create and start companies. Mm-hmm. I understand the altruism behind that statement, like behind those statements, right? Is like, arm the rebels, make it easy for everybody to do it. The flip side of that is I don't know if everybody should be a business owner. Like
very fair.
That when you've been in this game long enough, and maybe this is just like I'm getting old, I've got more gray hair, and I'm just getting more curmudgeon-y. Most people I meet that own companies, especially the ones that want to get out, they shouldn't be business owners. Like they should not be there, right? And I don't know which end of that spectrum is more true right now, that we need to make it easy for people to start companies, or on the other end of that spectrum is most people shouldn't start companies. I don't know. I'm not smart enough and don't have enough data to have an opinion there. I'm a little jaded for the folks that are really pushing that everybody should be able to start a business and we want everybody to start a business, because those people tend to have financial incentive for wanting people to start. Like Shopify wants 10 million Shopify stores. Let's just all cut the shit and be honest about that. That's fine. Fair. They're a public company. They want to grow. I'm not knocking that, but like look through the lens of like everybody should be an entrepreneur. It's like, no shit, you want Shopify stores. I just don't know if it's the right thing for society.
Yeah.
So I don't have a strong opinion. I'm curious. I'm asking the question.
Or for that individual person. And in all fairness, like you said, it's like, I'm not smart enough to know the answer there, where that line is. But I have seen a lot of people who were successful in spite of themselves. And oftentimes I would say, even in my own stuff, if I knew how hard it would actually be, I maybe wouldn't have started this or this or this, right? And it's like you break through those ceilings and you say, okay, I'm glad that I did, but you would have run into some situations, and I'd say a lot of people do run into situations where you almost have to go into it a little bit naive and say, I'm going to do this because I absolutely want to do this.
Yeah. Naivete and some masochism goes a long way as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And yeah, look, I think, so the flip side, and I was like, the part of me that wants it to be easier and easier to build companies is like, it's clear that entrepreneurs shape the world, and that like free market capitalism is largely responsible for everything good in our lives, right? Like it advances society. And I'm a big believer in that. Like I am a free market capitalist through and through. So I can absolutely take the side of this, which is, you know, the more entrepreneurs, the more likely we get more surface area for better society and progress. I won't argue that. I do, however, in, I guess, like where I am in life, I do see a lot of folks that have gone down this path that are now in it and saying like, I don't want to be here, right? Like, I just don't want to do this.
Yeah. So let's talk about, on the acquisition side of things, you mentioned that there are two ways that acquirers are looking at your business: offensively, defensively. Can you break that down for me a little bit more about like what an offense or defensive looks like?
You don't see it as much in consumer. So this is like, this may not be super relevant to consumer, but it does happen. So you don't see the defense part. Like companies, I know of companies who have been acquired and then shut down. Straight up, they got bought by a very large company who just didn't want them to exist anymore. I know that. Like, I have friends who have been those acquisitions that within 12 months they were shut down because it was better for the incumbent to just like kill them. So in consumer, that tends to be less of a thing because most consumer companies acquired, some amount of it is like there's brand value. And then most amount of it is just like financial performance. Most acquisitions are offensive. They are about like accretive financial gain to the acquirer. Those defensive acquisitions though, like they happen. And if you are a non-consumer entrepreneur, like sometimes that's actually an interesting way to think about positioning your business. It's like, you're going to piss off an incumbent, and that incumbent either wants to own you to capture the value of you eating their lunch, or they want to own you because they want the option of throttling you or shutting you off. Like, it's not as common, but I think anybody saying that that's like silly and what a waste of money is just they haven't played the game long enough. Right. They haven't talked to enough founders who've had their businesses acquired and shut down.
Yeah. So like you said, to your point, it's less common in product-based businesses.
Oh yeah. It's super uncommon. I don't even know of an example in a
I can't think of one either. Maybe something like at the level of Apple would potentially buy something that's, disruptive in their space, but
or they want IP, right? They want to lock out competition. Like that's what I mean by defense. It's like they may want it to exist, but they want to own it, and they just don't want their competitors to get their hands on it. So they're playing defense with the acquisition as opposed to like, I want to own this because I want to expand the market.
Right. Yeah. In the D2C side of things, what have you seen to be some of the bigger reasons? Let's say that you are running a D2C business, it's $10 million a year, and you're wanting to look to be acquired. Your books are great. Like, you've done everything right. What are the ways that you would say that they should start positioning themselves, that acquirers would be looking at their business in product-based businesses?
A $10 million a year D2C, like if that's your primary distribution channel, most of your acquirers are going to be like wholesalers. So wholesalers, in this case, like I'm calling them wholesalers. Most of those are going to be private equity guys. They want to buy you low and flip you for higher. And that's why I call them wholesalers. They're like literally the middlemen of the industry, right? To a terminal buyer, which is a strategic or an IPO. So the way a business that size gets acquired is multiple EBITDA. To dream of anything other is an improbable dream. Sure. So like strategic acquisitions, yes, they happen, but they typically happen for larger companies. Most of the acquisitions that we hear about as an industry and that you see announced on Twitter or whatever in the news, they're usually private equity. In beauty, you might have like even bigger, like it depends on the category. Like beauty has like very big buyers, like terminal buyers of brands. that once you get to a certain size and scale and growth rate, they just scoop you up and they roll you up, right?
Yep.
Most people that are listening to this show and most people I talk to and listen to our show are not that. Your buyer is a private equity buyer. It's a pure financial buyer who is like, they want to see a growth rate. They want to see an EBITDA. They want to see, even beyond EBITDA, what they want to see is a reasonable growth rate that's consistent and stable. And they want to see growing gross margin. So like your contribution dollars, your gross, it's like, it is an expandable thing. They want to see that.
Yep. To put it in terms for D2C folks, a lot of what's happening here is, let's just even say, bundling to a point, right? So we bundle products on the website. It helps things. Same thing happens here. The investor says, I could buy this company, this company, this company, bundle these together, sell it for a higher multiple to a more strategic buyer. And that's kind of where you're going. They're the broker. They're coming in saying, I'm going to put this together. Now it's an actual real thing.
Yeah, they're a wholesaler, man. Like private equety too they're a great buyer. Like they're very savvy.
Yeah.
These are like some of the best capital allocators in this modern economy. At least the ones I know and deal with, like they're very, very good. So I actually see private equity as a great buyer of a business.
Sure.
Like high probability of a transaction happening. They've typically got access to lots of capital and debt to do it. A lot of PE guys have rinsed and repeated the same formula over and over and over again. Like when I sold my first company in 2018, I sold it to a PE group who had a 20-year track record of buying companies like ours, rolling them up, and then selling them again.
Yeah.
And, and that's ultimately why we did the deal we did, because we thought, like, instead of saying, like, let's go get more money, it was, I had a high confidence in their ability to take us, make us better, and sell it again. So I took a lot of cash off the table and I kept a piece of the new thing. And then when they sold it again, I got a phone call like years later saying, "Hey, we multiplied your money by 700%."
Wow.
And I'm like, great. You did exactly what you said you would do. You were better at this than I was.
Yep.
So I'm a fan of private equity as a buyer for most founders. I think it's the right way to look at it.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. We work with a lot of private equity groups. We do a lot of the buy and sell side analytics for D2C brands that are looking at being purchased. And so they have a system. They know what they're doing. They have a team in place. They've done this repeatedly.
Yep.
It's a great situation for a lot of people.
Totally.
Let's transition into advertising. There's a couple of things you said that I like there. One was you said, and this is maybe a trigger alert for people who are in advertising, you've never clicked on an ad and purchased something.
Never.
Never.
Well, I guess like the context there is a social ad. I'm sure I've clicked on a Google ad because I was like in a rush. I actually try not to click on Google ads because, like, as a guy who's paid for a lot of them, I hate it when I Google a brand and somebody clicks. Like, I don't want you to click on my brand ad, so I try not to do that in Google.
A little Google karma there.
But social advertising, I don't trust it. Just because I haven't clicked, I'm sure it's influenced my purchasing.
Yep.
But I would say that like vast majority of the things I buy are because I've had a recommendation from somebody else.
Yeah. And so I'm with you. And here's the thing. We run advertising. That's what we do. I don't know that I can actually remember the last time I clicked on a social ad and purchased something. Yep. Now I know it happens. Like we track click-through conversions on all of our clients, right? So I know this. So then the question then is, if this is true for you, it's true for me, it's likely true for other people, is advertising pointless, or what do you think?
No, of course not. I'm a huge spender on advertising. I believe in it.
Right.
I do, however, I'm just, man, I hate dogma. I hate it all. I hate which is funny because that in and of itself is a piece of dogma. It's like, but I just don't like absolutes.
Yeah.
Because they tend to not hold up to reality in most cases. Right. So for me, the ad thing is more about like, it's probably more to do with my age. Like I'm in my 40s. I'm a bridge generation. So like I was born analog and kind of grew up mostly digital. Yep. Most of my shopping happens offline, right? I'm a higher net worth person, which means that even more of my shopping happens offline. Mm-hmm. I just don't buy a lot of shit. I think that's the other, like, I don't buy a lot, not a big, like, I'm a good consumer in the total dollar amount I spend, but I'm not a good consumer in the total transaction amount I consume.
I'm actually right there with you. Yep.
So because of that, it's like most social advertising is just not targeting me. Facebook's trying. They're trying really hard to show me shit like fucking Cuts clothing. Like they are really wanting me to buy Cuts. Yeah, great company. Like founder's amazing. But I never have. I'm just not, I don't buy that way. Like I go to a store and that's where I get my clothes. So I happen to be one of those people. And I believe there's a lot of me, where and honestly, like if this is breaking someone's brain, they just don't know the data. Like 85% of transactions happen offline in consumer. Offline.
Yep.
So it's not totally inconceivable that there's a significant amount of the population that just doesn't click on fucking ads on Facebook.
Yep.
It's a reasonable thing to say.
It is, but I appreciate it because it's a very honest thing to say that I don't think gets said very often in our space. But I'm right there with you, and that's why I liked it. And similar to you, I consider myself to be a good consumer in terms of like total dollar amount and things, but I'm not somebody who jumps on the bandwagon of things very easily or quickly. No. Just because part of it is maybe there's the jadedness of, I know what went into creating that ad to make you think that you absolutely need to buy this. And so there's part of me that is like, well, I'm pretty sure that I can actually see through part of that. And the other part is just to your point, I'm more interested in what people are actually saying who have used this. That said, to your point, I guarantee I've been influenced by ads. There are a lot of ads that I've seen, and I think that's a thing to make sure that we're keeping track of, where it's like, we optimize towards click-through rates on purchases for ads. Yep. And the reason for that, I believe, is because it makes the algorithm work harder at finding the ones that are likely to click. But those view-throughs still happen. And I think being able to understand how that's being impacted by your business in things that are less easily attributed is still important. And one of the ways we do that is with geo holdout tests. And I think that's still one of the
I'm a huge fan of a holdout, like for sure. I'm a big fan of local marketing and local advertising, because like really word of mouth is what we're all chasing, and word of mouth happens offline. It doesn't happen on as much as like the social networks want to tell us that it's like, no, it happens in chat and no, it doesn't. It happens when you're at somebody's house. Like the majority of the purchasing power in America, at least, is still in the two older generations. It's boomers and Gen X. That's the majority. Some of it, a good chunk of it now is in millennials, and very little purchasing power at the present moment is with Gen Z and younger. Very little, like as a percentage basis. So if you like just sit down and talk to your parents and ask them how they shop, they got all the money. And like my older friends who like are in their 50s, they also got all the money. And I look at them and I'm like, none of you have any consumer brands, none, like D2C brands, none. And the ones that you do have are because somebody recommended them. It's not because you clicked an ad. Yeah. So, and it's funny, like the reason I tweeted that was like, this is just where I'm a nerd. As I went through our house, right? My wife and I were like, we were looking at, I'm like, okay, what do we own? So we looked at like clothing, kitchen, like office, kid. And I was trying to make a sort of like a note of like, what brands do we buy from? Where does most of our share of wallet go? And then how did we find out about these products? And we started looking through all of our clothing. And I'm like, right now, like I'm wearing jeans from Mott & Bow, right? Shout out to Alejandro, great entrepreneur, great brand. That's a D2C brand. I bought them because I'm in a chat group with him. I didn't shop with him before that. I'm sure I saw an ad, but I didn't remember, right? But it's a great product. It's not knocking the product, and it's not knocking the people who run ads for him. It's just why I own it. Now, and I don't actually know if I would own the product if it wasn't like him and I were chatting and he's like, just try it out. And he sent me a couple pairs and I'm like, shit, now I'll buy more. Like, this is a good product. Yeah. Right. So most things and it's like N of one. So like I'm one person, my wife is one person. But dude, like I have a big enough social network, and I always like to ask people like, what's the latest thing that you've bought that you saw on the internet? I always ask that question to my friends. That's a good question. The answers are hilarious. And I almost do it out of masochism because it makes me feel awful I'm like, I've been in this business for 15, 16 years selling things on the internet. And the number of people that tell me they buy things on the internet is so fucking low. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I'm one of them.
I'm right there with you. One of the other things you sent that I appreciated was that there's a hard ads related lesson that you learned recently about not all channels carry the same level of trust. And I agree with you, but I got to know what happened to inspire that tweet.
Oh, Lomi, dude. Like, man, it's not an old business. It's been around 2.5 years. It's like been in market, not even 2 years yet. That has been an incredibly difficult product to advertise on Meta. And there's a lot of context to that. New category, older customer. But what we found is like, man, TV's nice for that product. And I started, when I realized how hard it was to advertise that product on Meta, I started looking around my network to say, like, who else has a hard time with this? Who else in my network has built companies in consumer, not on Meta? And then why? And you start to, like, there starts to be patterns that form, right? Like, I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and Twitter's a bit of a Meta echo chamber. And like, everybody's a Zuck fan and a Meta fan. And of course, like, it's an amazing ad platform. Like, I spend a weird amount of money there too. But you know, the more people I've found that sell to 50-plus-year-olds, the more brands and companies I found that spend almost no money on Meta. And could they make it work on Meta? Maybe, but their businesses are incredibly profitable, 9 figures plus. Like, there's no reason for them to turn around and be like, well, I guess I'll throw out what's working. So as I started to scratch around, I started to notice patterns in, like, where do they advertise? Television, radio, podcast, like, all of these things started to bubble up. TV mainly, and TV gets a bad rap on Twitter because it's not trackable and blah, 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 compared to Meta.
This, if you do a geo holdout, you can get a pretty good idea.
I know.
Yeah.
So I started, it's my own thesis. I don't know if there's any reality to it. But I look at what other companies are like, when a user is on a medium digesting content, and that medium has advertising, right? The other types of ads, it makes sense to me, will influence the perception of yours. So in a Facebook feed or in an Instagram feed or TikTok, good God, talk about the cesspool of the internet. Like, in a TikTok feed, if most of the content that they see is hot garbage, and you all of a sudden show up as amazing product, it's hard for me to get my head around how that doesn't color the user's perception of that ad.
Yeah.
Whereas you run a television ad and it's like the NFL playoffs or MLB, or it's the Food Network or HGTV, or pick one, right? And the thing that they saw before your ad was like Ford or P&G, Huggies, like things that people know and trust and have for a lot, or Amazon. And then there's your spot. I don't know how somebody could reasonably argue with me that would have no impact on the person's perception of your business. So yes, I believe strongly that every medium of advertising has a different trust rating. And I think that there's some color to add there in context around the age of the person viewing it. So again, I'm in my 40s. My parents think everything on Facebook is a scam.
Sure.
And I have sat in their neighborhood in Phoenix. They live in a golf community, as you do. And that's what they do. They play golf with all the old people. And I've talked to dozens and dozens, and they all believe that everything they see on Facebook is a complete scam. Like, fucking across the board. So I just started to, like, it's just pattern recognition. And you talk to enough people and you're like, man, This is why I even asked Sean this on our pod, like, what percentage of commerce do we believe is actually influenced by Facebook ads? I know what percentage all D2C brands spend on Facebook. It's all we hear about on Twitter, in conversations. It's like, how much money do you spend on Facebook? 70, 80%. Don't spend any money anywhere else. It's a waste of time until you've mastered Facebook. That is the current dogma in D2C. But what I don't know, I want to, is what percentage of total commerce, offline and online, is influenced by Facebook ads. And I bet you we would all be pretty depressed at the number because of how much of our value and self-worth is tied up in it.
Totally. I don't know that I've seen a study like that. I think it's an incredible study that I really hope somebody takes up to put together the study of even just the trust factor of the different ad platforms, which one has like this higher trust rating broken down by age, demographics, things like that. I think that would be a wildly interesting study.
Yeah, man. I think it's, totally. Yeah. Broken down by age would be the one I would want to see.
Yeah.
Right. Because like what I see on this versus what I see on a television versus what I hear on a radio or what somebody tells me in real, all of those things have a different impact on my perception of the thing.
Yeah. And I can say anecdotally, we don't have a whole lot of companies that are running TV, but we do have a couple. The one that runs an insane amount of TV, they're also pretty much targeting people that are 50 plus, like you said, and we cannot catch up. So Havas is running the TV spots. We don't do, traditional TV buys, and we can't catch them. Like they still spend more on TV and crush it there. And we're doing very well on the digital side, but every year we cannot catch up to what they're doing there.
Look,
it outperforms.
And there's no question that Facebook share of advertising, what is that number? I think Facebook's got, I don't know, it's like they account for like 10% of US digital ad spend.
Yep.
So think about that. Right. Like 10% of digital ad spend in the US is Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a quick Google search. I don't know how much, if that's accurate or not. Maybe it's like, I don't know, more. So Google and Facebook have like Google's got a huge percentage of digital ad revenue. Yep. Then there's Facebook, then there's Amazon. And then you look at like total advertising. That's just advertising. And then you look at like marketing. And Facebook's just not that big. Mm-hmm. Even though it's really important to all of us D2C brands. Right. So I think a lot of that has to do with age and demo. I think a lot of it has to do, and that to me immediately becomes a trust thing, is that the older you are, the less you trust digital, the more you trust analog, the younger you are. So like long-term, digital becomes more and more trustworthy, I think. Although I don't know, man. Like, again, I go on TikTok and I'm just like, how does anybody trust anything they see on this platform?
Sure. Yeah.
It all looks like shit.
It's wild. It is. Yeah, it is very different. And I'm right there behind you. I turn 40 later this year. So we're in a similar situation. Yep. I will say, as an advertiser, the channel, I do think that Facebook tends to outperform most of the other digital social channels so far.
Yep.
I think that there is a demographic that can sway my opinion on that towards TikTok for certain demographics. I think that there's also the content that you're watching, like you were saying with TV, in the digital world. I would say that's why I sometimes see some really strong performance on YouTube, because oftentimes when you came to YouTube, you came to watch a little bit of a longer length thing that was maybe higher quality production. There was more trust even in the thing that you came to watch versus, like you said, scrolling through garbage after garbage after garbage. And so I'd say that we do see some strong results on YouTube, depending on what it is. And I think that may have something to do with the trust there.
Yeah, man. I mean, what we're talking about is like a broken down version of like the product market fit thing.
Sure.
The product is easy to understand. It's what you sell. The market piece, I think it's too often simplified into the customer. So like, do you have a product that customers want? But really what product market fit means is you have a customer and a distribution channel to reach that customer. And ideally you have multiple distribution channels to reach that profile of that customer. Right. And I think in D2C, it's more often than not, the default is Facebook.
Sure.
Rightly so. Not arguing that. But there's a lot of product and a lot of product categories that are consumer where Facebook is not the ideal place to go to market. Even though you have product customer fit, To get the market, you need to figure out the channel and distribution. And I think we would all be shocked at how many don't work on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm going to transition us into some operations stuff that you said that I really appreciate. You said this was on your Operators podcast, episode 38. Inventory can make or break a consumer business. Inventory, right? God, yeah. And I agree with you, but break this down for me. Why inventory?
Because for a consumer business, it's where most risk lies. So it could be quality issues. It could be you bought too much, you bought too little, you put it in the wrong place. So like it's at the wrong distribution center for where you're selling it right now. It's in the wrong market. It could be a change in duties and import fees. Like inventory is where most risk in a consumer business lies. So I think it's totally fair. Like what Mike and I were talking about is like, it's the place that it's unsexy, but it is where the rubber meets the road in this kind of company.
Yeah. I see businesses who have done very well scaling up to 5 million without any focus whatsoever on that. Let's just even say, especially in apparel type companies where inventory is more of an issue because there's seasonality components. They bought too much of the wrong thing.
Yep.
And then, there was actually a company, there was an apparel company. I want to say they crossed the 30 million mark and we got to be part of that ride from them from somewhere like 5 million to 30 million. And inventory became such a big problem where, they over ordered a massive amount of the wrong products, under ordered on the wrong products. And it created a situation where they had too much inventory that they couldn't sell, that they had to sell through, that they discounted. That discounting then creates, less people buying the stuff that you actually wanted them to buy. It turned into a very interesting thing. And there's very little that we could do as the advertising.
Profile of the business, which can impact your banking agreements and covenants. Like,
right.
So much behind building consumer businesses that have to do with the product and supply chain that is like life or death. And I'm happy we talked about it. I actually want to go even deeper on this and bring on other people and how they think about supply chain and inventory, because it doesn't get spoken about enough. Advertising takes over the bulk share of the conversation in consumer. Obviously, like distribution is important. But it is the place where like, man, if you're going to make a mistake, it's going to kill you. It's probably going to be there. It's the slowest. I think that's the thing that like, if you're new to consumer, the slowest moving thing in your business in D2C is the physical fucking thing. It's what you ship. It's what you make and what you ship. So from the point where you place a PO to when you get a thing to sell, you are dealing in months.
Right.
Whereas every other action you take in the business, turn this ad on, launch this email, send this SMS, ask this influencer, all that shit is hour by hour. So like time unit, months, time unit, minutes. You cannot react as fast with inventory. So you need to be more precise and more calculated.
And align the inventory with the advertising. The other thing that we ran into for a brand one time was silos. And the inventory team and the advertising team weren't talking to each other at all.
No, of course.
And the marketing team says, hey, our goal is to double or whatever it was, what we did year over year. The inventory team had only ordered 50% more inventory.
Yep.
So this isn't going to happen. And that ad budget that you've set as a marketing team is going to be wasted now because you actually can't reach the revenue goal that you set because you don't have the product to make that happen.
Well, your revenue goals should be actually backed out of. Too often than not, growth and revenue targets are based on what is possible and not what is reasonable. And what is reasonable is the inventory and the finance piece, which is like, what is the amount of growth that we believe we can attain for a reasonable amount of risk? And that reasonable amount of risk is what changes brand to brand, industry to industry, founder to founder, age of company. But super, super important that is a constant conversation in your business.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I like that. You also talked about building a high performance team. There are 4 levers. What do you think let's just even say if we dial back the 4 levels to just one, what or two, what are the top things that you think need to happen in a D2C business to build a team that gets it and can perform at a high level?
In the context of D2C, look, the biggest thing with everything team is trust.
Sure.
Anybody who's done it can back that up. There's definitely books written on it. Like Patrick Lencioni is a good one. Like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and it's just a great book. So I think that there's no such thing as a high performance team without trust first. You can hire the very best people that you can get. I don't think it's possible to hire the best person.
Sure.
That's weird math. And it just is. So like what it comes down to is like, you need to build a team that you can trust to execute, to plan. And that like, then everything backs to that, like culture and fit and humble, hungry, smart, like all those things. But like, to me, it's just trust. And I've watched it. Like, even when I don't trust somebody, it really impacts the performance of myself and that person because there's no trust. So I think it's the thing that you should think about most when you're building a team.
Let's say that you are coming into a business and you're trying to help them grow. And you see that trust is maybe eroded.
Yeah.
What are the best ways to handle that? Is it replacement? Is it work through it?
Best, I'm going to go with best means fastest. Fastest is replaced.
Okay.
You can rebuild trust. You can like work on that stuff long-term, but it takes time. It's very hard. It's more often than not, what I'm telling people is like, look, you just have the wrong people in the wrong seats. That's just like the sad reality of it. I got a guy right now that I've been coaching and advising for 3 years now. And like, he's got a couple people in his company that they need to go. They've gotten them so far, like where they are, but their business has outgrown the person. And because of that, he's like, I just can't trust them to do their job anymore. Like he's doubting all the work output of these two people. And they're in two different functions of the business. And I'm like, look, I get it. They've been here a while, but like the company outgrew them and they didn't keep up and they didn't grow with the business, and that eroded trust. And like, to rebuild it means that those people would need to grow to a level that founder is like, I now trust them again. And I'm like, that's just unlikely, man. You should just go hire somebody who's been to the party before. So it happens. It's not the people side of business is messy, right? But like, it's the most important part. And it might sound heartless what I'm saying, but like, it's true and it's common.
While it can sound heartless, I'd say having gone through situations of firing people, things like that. And it's the hardest thing that I've done as an entrepreneur is the people side of the business.
Yeah.
It can feel heartless maybe on that one-to-one relationship, but allowing that to continue in the company is heartless towards every other person impacted by it. The whole rest of the team, your own family, their family members, your customers. It is the heartless thing. Let's say it's the gutless thing to do.
Yeah. Your job is to take care of the whole, not the one. Right. And that means yourself too. But yeah, that's a big part of the job is to look at the whole. That's your job.
Right. We are getting close on some of the time here. So I have a couple of other things I want to do. I've never done this with anybody on here before. You're one of the first people I've interviewed that I feel is actually deep into the D2C Twitter space. Love it or hate it for what it's worth. And so I just wanted to do some D2C rapid fire questions here. These are things that if you guys are listening and you're not involved in the D2C's Twitter space, maybe that's good for you. There are some heated arguments that can happen from time to time over absolutely ridiculous things. So I'm just going to ask you the hot button topics. Cost caps, for or against?
Right. Every answer is going to be depends. I'm going to default to, I'm actually for them. I think they're a great tool in the belt.
Yep. There's a lot of great that you can do with that.
Yep.
Attribution was a big one. Attribution. What are your thoughts?
I got two. I think having a third-party tool to help you validate what you're seeing in platform usually not a bad thing, can be useful, but ultimately if you're spending money on advertising, the only thing you should care about is what the platform sees, because it's the only thing they can optimize on. So Facebook can't see your data in a third-party tool. Doesn't matter how good it looks. Facebook can't see it, therefore it's not optimizing on it.
Smart. Touch grass.
I don't even know where that started.
It's just the idea that it's
like get the fuck off Twitter on the weekend and go do something fun. Again, I'm old. So like when the weekend rolls around, I'm skiing or mountain biking, and I have an 8-year-old daughter. I like to spend time with her. So I think the touch grass thing was like, everybody just needs to chill out and go have a life that's not, Twitter.
Instead of arguing about attribution on Sunday.
Instead of arguing about cost cats and attribution, just get outside. Yeah.
Last one, ugly ads, for or against?
Oh, I'm broadly against I don't like the what we've called them, right?
Sure.
I'm against that term. I'm for great advertising. Like a great ad is a great ad no matter how it looks. But I think this like ugly ads thing is like, we're shooting for the wrong thing. And that as marketers, we should aspire to a lot more than an ugly fucking ad. That's just fair. My old man talking here.
That's fair. There are good ads that are ugly, bad ads that are ugly. There are good ads that are not ugly, beautiful, that are highly produced, and there are bad ads that are highly produced.
Yes. Just make great ads.
Yeah.
I think where I'm at with this, like the broad ad creative space right now, is it all looks the same and talks the same and quacks the same. And it's just, it's a lot of the same. And I think there's a reason for that. It's like, to a degree it works, but it's also behind the statement that marketers ruin everything, right? It's like we take something that works and then we pervert it and use it and over abuse it. And it's like we ride the shit out of it and put it away. And like, I just think that like great marketing is different, not better. It's not like, I believe in that statement to my core. I think the very best marketers produce unique work, right? The greatest example for a young brand, modern, would be Liquid Death. They do great.
Absolutely agree.
It's legendary, great creative that's different than, I don't know the business that well. I don't know the financials. I know that they've grown very fast, and they don't make ugly ads, and they make great marketing. It's great creative. So like, I would love to see all of D2C take up this challenge of like, let's make really great ads, like things that make people be like, like I'll remember that.
Yeah.
Like we should aspire to an ad that is worthy of a Super Bowl level of spend. And I think the D2C space has been like, I can't spend more than $5,000 on an ad. Therefore, I'm only going to spend $50 making it, because that's what the algorithm wants. What a shitty aspiration as a marketer.
I like what you're saying. I agree. I want to see something that makes me go, wow, that was absolutely amazing. The thing that I think about sometimes would be even print ads. Like that was an advertising format that it's like, you see it in a magazine and it's like beautiful, 3 words sometimes, but the imagery that went into it, you're just like, wow.
One of my best sources for ad inspiration, I go to magazine racks and I just look at the covers, and that's what I go to for copy and getting attention. There's like so much. Yeah. Get off the internet, man. Go back to the touch grass thing. Just like get outside and, like I buy magazines. I've talked about it on the pod, but like huge fan of Monocle. I just got this latest issue. I'm looking for like design and creative inspiration. And like people say Louis Vuitton doesn't advertise, right? But like that's a great ad.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So
very little words. I'm literally obsessed. I'm literally obsessed. Little words.
Yep. I know. Fuck. God. Yeah.
Okay. So final segment is all about who is Matt Bertulli. Getting to know the personal side of you. This does not have to do anything whatsoever with the e-commerce side of stuff. But let's talk about childhood. What was your childhood like, and how has that maybe impacted who you are today?
Yeah, man. I had a pretty normal childhood. Like great family, super lucky to be born where I was born, who I was born into. I grew up in a retail family. My mom, my whole side, her parents, they were all business owners, entrepreneurs, right? Like I grew up in the back rooms of retail stores. So like I've just kind of always been in this space, like just selling things, marketing things. I love commerce, man. Like I grew up in a family that like we just our livelihood was commerce. So because of that, I'm a student of it. And I like it. Like it's my hobby. I really like it. When I travel, it's what I pay attention to. I read books on it. Like I'm a student of it. And I think that commerce is an art form and that we don't appreciate it as such anymore. It's become far too transactional. But it's like a major part of culture. So like my childhood was very formative to like what I do today. But it was also super boring. Like middle class family, my parents play golf.
Sure.
Like there's nothing fancy about it. I ride mountain bikes and ski and, there's nothing about me that's like, ooh, that's intriguing. It's like, no, not at all.
That's good though. There's something to be said for vanilla. In fact, vanilla happens to be one of my absolutely favorite flavors of ice cream. My wife thinks I'm nuts, but I'm like, man, the subtlety of a really good vanilla.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's probably why I like, when I talk about marketing, it's like, I like things that stand out just because like I don't.
Sure. So speaking of things that stand out though, you guys, Jay-Z is one of your investors basically, right? Yeah. Have you met Jay-Z and is there any kind of a story that goes along with meeting Jay-Z?
Yeah, I definitely have. Marcy Venture Partners. So Jay-Z, Jay Brown, Larry, Marcus are the three partners there. They were an early investor in Pela case. They came in just after I did. Right. So I've spent a decent amount of time with those guys and they're savvy, man. Like, it's funny. I would say like one of the things I'll say like they're all three of them are different, right? So like Jay-Z and Jay Brown are, from my perception of it, is like they're so freaking savvy with anything to do with like culture in America. Like they've got such a strong grasp of it. It's scary. And you see that right away, like every conversation I've had that's on display with them. So, which is why, like, when you look at their fund, they fund, like, they're in consumer and they care a lot about where's culture going. So, yeah, like, even like, I was, the first time I met Jay-Z was at one of their, they do an annual event, right? And I remember walking in to the event and he knew who I was right away.
Wow, that's cool.
Right? Like I went up to introduce myself and he's like, "Oh, you're the Canadian guy." And that caught me off guard. I'm like, yeah, man. So it's like, it just, and it automatically, like, it level set. I'm like, this guy he's in it. He's paying attention.
Yeah.
He knows what they're invested in. At least that's my perception of it. I could be wrong. He might, who knows, right?
Right.
But I've got a lot of respect for what they're trying to do. And I will say, like, they've taught me, I've just, in a short time I've spent with them, like, I've learned a lot about, like, influencer, like large scale, like celebrity influencer, like how to think about it. Like I've actually brought what about Pela or Lomi partnering up with this celebrity? And I've literally had them sit there and it's like Jay Brown would be like, "No, they're terrible. That won't work." And then he'll tell me, like, as a person, they're fine. He's like, "But he give me the characteristics. Like, this is what you want from a fan base and following. And let me show you what it looks like when it clicks. Like, why does a Ryan Reynolds work or a Rihanna work with what they do? But like somebody else will just completely fail." Their understanding of that is just so freaking cool. Because that's a world I don't know and don't follow. Yeah. And like have very little interest in, except as a marketer.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And it's interesting though, like you said, the idea of like certain celebrities clicking and others not. I can remember we ran ads for a coat company called Centeler. Beautiful coats. Buena Centeler was the creator there. And J-Lo, would be spotted wearing her coat, and it's like this. Meghan Markle wears their coat, and all of a sudden you can't see anything else because it just soars off the charts, and you're thinking, this is wild that certain celebrities have very little blip here, and other celebrities just completely crush it here. And there's not like a rhyme or reason necessarily. It's not like I couldn't look at this and say this one's going to work if this one's not, but it sounds like Jay Brown can.
I think that's the thing. Like, that's their business though, right? I realized early on, and like part of what attracted to us as a brand and as founders to them as investors was that is their business, and that they've got an expertise that we don't. Right. And that's kind of what you want when you have investors, is like, you want people around you that are smarter than you in the things that you're not. So that world of influence, right, I'm still like a neophyte in it. They're clearly masters of it. They've made their whole living on it. Yeah. And I think when you look at like certain celebrities or certain creators, and we're seeing it now with like this new generation of creator on TikTok, like you've got people who have 100 million plus followers that can't sell more than 5,000 of something. Mm-hmm. That says a lot, right? And it might just be saying that they haven't found creator product market fit yet.
Sure.
That could be it. Or it could just be that their audience is built on not a lot. There's not a lot of substance, mm-hmm. Maybe they're overexposed, so they promote too much shit, therefore nothing works. But then on the flip side, you do have the Rihannas and the Kardashians of the world, where everything they touch seems to like just rip. And, I think there's a lot to learn from them. Or like what Jason and Hexclad have done with Gordon Ramsay was like such perfect product, celebrity fit, mm-hmm. like beautifully executed.
Yeah, totally agree. I don't know if you know this, but the name Up Arrow that I have here for the podcast is based on Knuth's up arrow notation, which is a mathematical term. Have you ever heard of that before?
No. You're a nerd.
Well, you talked about being nerdy. I'm a nerd as well.
Love it.
So when you're trying to make a number that is massively big, and you're going beyond what exponentiation can do for you, you get into Knuth's up arrow notation. And the reason why I picked that is because I like this idea of not just growing your business to this massive degree, but like everything in your life. How do you up arrow your relationships? How do you up arrow your health? How do you up arrow just, who you are? I understand that you have a list of principles that you live by. You have up arrowed your life in this way. What are these principles? Some of them, all of them, whatever you want to share with that.
Too many to list to like go through. I actually keep a Notion doc. I'll pull it up and I'll give you a few.
Nice.
Yeah, you know what it is, man? It's things I collect over time, right? Mm-hmm. So like the first one on my list it's like a lot of them are on business, but they all apply to life. But like my first one is always accountability is the currency of autonomy. So like be accountable and you'll get more freedom. Like if you don't like being micromanaged, be more accountable.
Brilliant.
Do the unscalable. Like I've seen this time and time again in my career that like doing things that others don't want to do because they don't look scalable often leads you to finding opportunity because your competition will ignore it because it looks stupid and unscalable. I think, scale your thinking by scaling your writing has been a big one for me.
Because it forces you to think about how you,
right? Like,
right.
I got a lot that I would say like they shape how I think, they shape how I act. One of my favorites lately is movements don't start with stopping. So like for our companies, we're trying to have positive impact in the world. We're not just trying to like, I think it was a Henry Ford thing, right? That if like the sole purpose of a business is to like make money, that business has no soul or some version of that.
Sure.
So, for us with Pela and Lomi, we do have bigger ambitions that are around impact, and which means like we're trying to create movements. And oftentimes what we run into is like in the world of climate, at least, everything has been about stopping. So like, don't fly, don't do this, cancel that, like all of it. And I keep thinking like that just led me to this whole like movements don't start with stopping thing, because how are we supposed to move the world forward if the only thing we're ever telling somebody to do is don't? It just feels completely at odds with what we're trying to achieve. Man, I probably have like 30 or 40, and I reread these and I check them on the regular, and they're often like inspiration for thinking. You know, if I've got a problem in the business or in life, I will refer back to like these principles. Strong position loosely held is one that I'm constantly going back to, because like I don't want to be a stubborn mule just for the sake of being stubborn, you know, and like I might have a belief right now that next year could be wrong. I don't know. So I think like when you read something, oftentimes what happens is I'll read something and I'll take it and I'll stick it on the list because I'm like, it had an impact on me when I read it, and I'd like to revisit and reread it later.
Yeah, I love it. It's beautiful. It reminds me a little bit even of, just you were talking about one of those principles that you read was about, I'm going to butcher it, but like movements don't start with stopping.
Yep.
Right. And what we've done in the idea of what you're saying with Henry Ford there about businesses not having a soul, if the sole profit point is just money. At Element, at our company, our mission statement is to amplify joy through profitable business growth. And it's exactly that same concept of what you just said, where there are going to be like the business's goal is obviously to grow companies profitably. Like that's the business of what we're doing. But we could do that in a way that is completely soulless, that's cancerous to society. Like we could do it in very bad ways. And the reality is there are going to be times where we don't succeed necessarily in that goal. There are going to be times where things just don't work out. Things shut down, economies shut down. But we can still amplify joy. We can make sure that we did what we said we were going to do. And we could do it in such a way that we take care of our employees take good care of our customers, and we amplify joy through that method. And I think that that's where, like you said, it's like there's a thing that we can do. And I like that verb of like amplify. It is not a stopping something. It is a starting something.
Absolutely.
You might not want to do the joyful thing because it's maybe hard. You might want to react in a negative way when a customer is frustrated with you, but take that step to be active, to amplify joy.
Yep. 100%, man.
We are at time. If people want to follow you, work with you in some way, what is the best way for them to get in touch, stay in touch, follow?
Twitter. You can find me, M. Bertulli, Operators Podcast. We're everywhere. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all that stuff. Or just go to mattbertulli.com. You can contact me that way. Perfect. I'm easy to find. Matt, I'm not. Yeah, I agree with that. And we'll link, I'm sure, some of these things in the show notes too. Matt, I really appreciate you coming on here, sharing your time, sharing your wisdom. It's been a lot of fun. Super fun, man. This has been good. I like it. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Up Arrow Podcast with William Harris. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.